Hi again, everybody. I'm Jamie Allison, and this is the Big Idea, Big Moves podcast. This is the destination for high performers. We talk to people from different genres, different niches, just people doing really cool things in their space. And I know I've got one of those today. You know that we've talked to CEOs, we talk to entrepreneurs, we talk to people, but a lot of times we're just looking at different ways to kind of have that whole life success, to try to kind of find some of the different things that and strategies that people are using. And so, again, I have a really cool story that we're going to be able to go through today. Just before we jump into that, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know we have a relationship with Epitome Sportswear, and they, like us, are very connected with whole life success. And so this isn't just high performance wear. It's things that, if you're a mom going to a soccer game, if maybe you're going to an arena for a hockey game, or just going out and doing some hiking, they've got something that fits for all of that. But the other part that we really like as well is that they think it's important to give back to the community they serve as well. And so they're working to impact the inequities in opportunity for girls and women in sport. And for that reason, a portion of their profits go directly to organizations and initiatives that support girls in sport. So you can check them out through our bio. You can take a look through there, or just go directly to Epitome, EPITOME sportswear.com and check it out. And hopefully you'll find something that fits for you. And so really excited to have Sara Schulting-Kranz with us today. She's a speaker, trauma and personal leadership authority. She has her own podcast as well, and a wilderness guide, an expert in utilizing nature healing, which is kind of cool as well. She's a multiple trauma survivor herself, and she coaches clients. She does leadership, executive stuff as well, and organizations generally on the necessity and benefits of using nature for mental and emotional health. And so she also has a book, which I know we'll talk about some of that as well, about her experiences, and it's called Walk Through This, Harness the Healing Power of Nature and Travel the Road to Forgiveness. So first of all, I know, Sara, just before we came on here, we were talking about you're doing a lot of these types of things right now. And so thank you for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, it's been a bit of a whirlwind, I'm sure, for you since, especially since your book came out a while ago in the last couple of years. Maybe just first of all, how's that experience with you been, knowing your message is connecting with so many people right now in a really strong way?
You know, it's wild to me. I did a keynote on Friday, and
Yeah,
it was the first time that I've actually delivered this particular keynote
mhm,
where I really went a little bit more deep into my story,
yeah,
and also gave 5 pillars to the resilience that I've learned, and like really powerful leadership through this framework. And afterwards, the number of people that came up to me and said, "Oh my gosh, thank you for being authentic.
yeah,
Thank you for being you, and thank you for sharing the pillars that it talks about stuff that we don't normally talk about, forgiveness being one of them, self-forgiveness being one of them, in business and in life." And it's wild to me how many people said that that was the number one thing that they needed to hear.
yeah,
I mean, I knew it, right? Like, I know
yeah,
this stuff because this has become my life. Over the last 10 years, I have developed into this woman that I look back on. And I'm like, I don't even know where was I for this whole entire time? Because
yeah,
through my own traumas and through nature and adventure and all of the work that I've done, I've now become who I am today, keynote speaking and author and all of the things. And it's just really cool to see the impact. I don't even have any other words for it. When you find your purpose and you create, and that impact is spread into the world, there is nothing cooler. It is just
yeah.
so much fun.
Well, and maybe so, because we're going to talk about some of those things that really connect with
Yeah.
people, but maybe just to give a bit of a framework for people listening who maybe haven't read your book yet, and maybe understand your journey a little bit. Can you walk us through that a little bit about some of the, I mean, difficult trauma that you've been through in your life to get you to this point?
Absolutely. And I share this, it's interesting. I share this in my keynotes as well. And I've done a TED Talk on forgiveness, but I
Mm,
share it because now you can hear my story, but there's pieces of the story, the underlying foundation
mhm,
that we've all been through. When my traumas actually started at 17. I was sexually assaulted by somebody that I knew,
yeah,
and I was sitting in a police station being questioned. Now, the questions of, like, are you sure this happened? And why didn't you scream? Why didn't you run? All of the things. And I was not protected, right? And I was totally judged through this experience. And even I had to get a restraining order on this guy. Now, when I explain this, when I'm standing up there on stage and I'm explaining this to people, it doesn't have to be that trauma that's creating that where you've experienced this yourself. But how many times have we sat in a boardroom or in, at a family function or wherever, and you're speaking your voice, but you're not heard, you're not seen, right? And you're trying so hard desperately to be seen and heard, and yet the other person on the other side is not. They're judging, they're not understanding, they're choosing something different than what your words, choosing to hear something different than what you're delivering. Now, I share this also because we as humans have a responsibility to sit there and actually listen and to be able to hear as well, and to stop judging so much, because there's this common thread that we all have, authenticity, that we so often don't utilize. So that was my trauma at 17. And I learned through that, and it's such a deep story, and I learned through that experience. My mom was my mentor. And we all have mentors in our life, and where are we being that mentor for others? And right. And so my mom used to walk me down Main Street every single day at 4 o'clock. And she would say, hold your head high. People may not believe you. It doesn't matter. You know yourself, you know your story, you know your truth. And she truly had become, she was my everything. My mom passed away this last July. And then at 40, I ended up experiencing my second round of trauma when I found out that my husband had been betraying me for most of our marriage. And there was multiple addictions involved, and just, it was horrendous. Now I'm 49, I'm turning 50 this year. So it's coming up on 10 years. What's fascinating, though, through this journey of my life is to see where my resiliency at 17 and what my mom taught me, the power of one person, right? The one mentor, and how that resilience that I learned at 17 also brought me into my age of 40. And I somehow or another learned how to stand up again, right? Like through my own trauma at 40. And I'm going to tell you, that was awful. That was the most debilitating. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And when people question me, or they start to, even on LinkedIn, I've had it where people are like, well, they question how I am or who I am. And I always say, you know what? Let me tell you, if you don't know my backstory, don't judge. And by the way, you shouldn't judge regardless. But the bottom line is, I wouldn't wish this on anybody. The power behind it, though, is this ability to rise back up again. And if I can share that message of resilience and personal leadership with anyone, and allow other people, companies, teams, whatever, to be able to rise through what we have experienced literally over these last many years, that was horrendous, though. I'm going to tell you. And I think that the beautiful part of my journey is literally that, being able to reflect on it and to see how far that I've come, but my kids have come, that we have come, and the impact that it's literally created on so many people.
Yeah. And you touched on it there, but maybe just, I mean, if people hear your story, they may think, oh my gosh, those are almost, extraordinary, difficult things to go through. But how have you found that, when you mentioned that everybody has something, it may not be the exact same thing. Like, how are people making that connection that, okay, it may not be the same thing, but I understand these feelings, or I understand kind of where that takes you, I guess.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, when you, for example, like any little trauma, it doesn't matter. It doesn't even, it can be a setback. It can be a challenge, any challenge that you were up against, right? Like when that happened to me at 40, I was up against a challenge. And my challenge was, am I going to lose my life, or am I going to find this greater, deeper sense of self? And we all have that at some point, where it could be, you get into a car accident, and then you're standing there going, how did this happen? Why did this happen? You're sitting in traffic and you're like, I just need to get out of this space. Well, you got to learn, you got to utilize patience here, right? Utilize patience. If it is, a divorce, any divorce, that's a hard thing to walk through. A relationship breakup, losing your job, changing careers. Can I step out of that space? I was on a call with a client right before this, and I was explaining to her, you've got this incredible gift, and where you're at right now, utilize this gift in order to grow as a woman and create space and also to create impact in this world. So any challenge that we have, it doesn't have to be as big as mine. Are you kidding me? Like, that's no. No. But, resilience is born from the littlest of things. It's not something that it's those seedlings, the moments when we are put up against our greatest fears, or, you know, wanting to change our life in some way. It's through those little moments that we create the resilience for who we become.
So with the resilience part, you talked about the impact your mother had,
Yeah.
at a long time ago. Um, do you find, I guess, is res is resilience a learned
Learned.
experience? So
Yes, it
maybe
is.
explain that, because I think a lot of people would think that, okay, well, maybe it's because of how somebody innately is, versus is it a learned thing to be able to deal with? And how do you start to do that if you're going, I mean, there's lots of people I'm sure who are listening that have gone through or are going through something difficult and are struggling with that.
Okay, so there's a few things I'd love to touch on here. You know, how many people have lost their lives to suicide because they don't talk, they don't share, right? One of the greatest things that we can do in our resilience is actually to stand up and to share a truth, and to be able, goes back to not being seen,
Mhm.
right? And not being heard, is to be able to understand that we are all humans and we all go through something similar at some point. Like we're all going through something, right? Um, Resilience, though, is not something that one person is born with more than another person. And that's the thing that I actually had to sit with for a long time, because some of my best friends are like, well, yeah, but that's you.
Mhm.
Like that's just who you are. No, I was born and raised in a village of 1,100 people, and my high school was in between two towns in a cornfield. I graduated with 56 people. I did not have access to anything. Like, I really didn't. I had access to nature, and I had access to my mom that taught me that one message of just walking through it, which became the book, right? Like, that literally became the book. The first 20 years of our life creates the foundation for our resilience later on in life. That's been scientifically proven. And when we have those people in our lives, teachers, mentors, parents, you know, best friends, whatever, that teach us how to get back up again. For example, tying your shoe. We're going to go to the smallest of things. Now,
Mhm.
I've got 3 boys, right? The hardest thing for me to do when they were learning how to tie their shoe was not to step in and do it for them,
Mhm.
was not to buy them Velcro shoes.
Yeah.
How many of us wanted to buy our kids Velcro shoes because we were like, can you just hurry up? You have to let people learn how to get back up again on their own. And so that's those little pieces of resilience, right? Those little pieces of learning and how failing and getting back up again, taking
Yeah.
risks, getting back up again. We lose that somewhere along the line between childhood and adult. And we have to remind ourselves, and this goes into the pillars that I teach on stage, we have to come full circle and remind ourselves that we are human. We are meant to take risks. We are meant to fail. It's not if, it's when. And we are meant to step outside of our comfort zone and learn new things. That's resilience. It's a choice. And so it's that reframe of the story and the perspective shifting of this, you know, I can't get through this, to I'm going to take a next step and start to walk through this to the light that's on the other side.
Mhm.
I mean, dude, I could jam with you for hours on this.
Yeah.
Clearly, like this is like my passion. This is the stuff that I
Yeah.
love. Um, the other thing, though, that I will say is that we also have to remind ourselves that we're never too old to learn something new.
Mhm.
And I think that that's the one thing that we sometimes get stuck in,
Yeah.
is that, like, you know, we really do, we get stuck in life and stuck down this monotony of work and, you know, everything external, when in reality you're here put for a reason, and that learning is a continual process. I want to be learning up until my last breath, quite
Yeah.
frankly.
And how important was it, or how impactful was it in your learning, or in almost further building your resilience, the fact that you were a mom in your last kind of, traumatic experience, and having to, it's not only you that has that effect, and I mean, I have all the respect in the world for mothers to start with, because of
Oh,
the resilience they build, but I can't imagine going through something like that and having to be the caregiver of other people through that.
yeah, yeah. You know, so I've been a mom for a very long time. My oldest is 31. I'm 49.
Mhm.
Read about it in the book. I don't give everybody everything in this podcast because
Yep.
there's too much there.
Yep.
I really want to touch on the other stuff, but I've been a mom for 31 years, and my middle is 21 and my youngest is 17. And, I was asked this on a podcast earlier of how are your kids doing? And, the most important thing that we can also do is understand that we don't have to shoulder all of it alone. Whatever it is, whatever we are going through. And this is, when I watch CEOs and when I watch people just fall apart, and I'm like, nothing in life was meant to be held alone. We are meant to actually, that's like part of your team, right? Find those people that's also to support you so that you're extending a hand to other people and bringing them up to you, but then you also have to be able to take somebody's hand. And so for me, it was really finding those people that could also support me and my kids through the trauma that we were in. They're coaches. My kids, my younger two are huge athletes.
Mm-hmm.
My middle plays water polo for USC. He's co-captain of the team, and just amazing. My oldest is a successful entrepreneur. My youngest plays basketball. And so I went to their coaches and I was like, look, and their teachers. And I said, I need help. I can't go through this alone.
Mm-hmm.
And that was hard, because how many of us have a hard time receiving? How many of us have a hard time asking for help and saying, I can't go through this alone? It's one of the biggest gifts that we can give to ourselves and to those people around us that are in our life, because you're not meant to do it alone.
Yeah.
But it also, I think, I don't know if they, I love my guys, my boys. I call them my guys because they're like men now, right?
Yeah.
So much testosterone. Gosh.
I only have girls, so
So much
it's the opposite.
testosterone, I'm telling you. But I don't know. For me, I didn't realize the impact of my mom's really walking me through this until I was probably 40, 41, 42. And in our last conversation that we had together, I'm going to start to cry. The last conversation that we had together, I actually talked to her about that. I didn't know that she was going to pass away. It just happened to be our last conversation.
Oh, wow.
I know. And it was very unexpected. And we had a deep conversation about that, and I think that for my young boys, like I'm hopefully modeling for them what it is to do the same. And then they will take this into their own life and be the men that, I really, I aspire them to be. They got to choose to do it. So
yeah,
I think they're doing a great job.
I'm sure having that example is the biggest part of it, right? So, I mean, obviously your own mother, had that kind of impact on you. So, I'm sure you're doing the same for them. One other thing you talked about and probably came from, some of your experiences in the past as well is how you use nature, I guess, to get through some of this, and how you do that even when you're talking with organizations and leaders and things like that. Is that something that you always did? I guess would be the first part of the question. The other one is are there how is that something that was a bit of a revelation to you that it can have that impact?
No, I did not always. So I did not realize this until I was 40. And actually
Okay.
it was 42-ish when I had somebody come to me, and apparently people were talking about like, why is she going through, what is she doing that's different than everybody else? Because I was healing rather quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it was like, oh, is that just because it's her, or is it because she's utilizing something? And then I started talking about, well, no, I'm like going onto the ocean and paddling and, spending some time alone and really reflecting. And I had whales that would come up out of nowhere, and literally I would be screaming at them, like, get out of my way, because I'm trying to heal. But I think that the coolest thing about this journey in nature is that I've tapped into something that very few, we're just starting to understand it. Right? Like there's a lot of science on it, the science of awe. We've heard the science of awe and how awe helps with PTSD and trauma victims. And we've heard how like climbing mountains, the challenge can teach us something. Well, what if you put it all together? You know what I mean? Like that's literally what this has taught me. And it's been this ability to, and this is, again, goes into the pillars that I also talk about. It's this ability to see that the world is so much greater than what we are living through. Right. And so when we can utilize and step into that and shift that perspective and reframe where we're at, where can we reframe everything else in our life too? So in my own journey, my curiosity has been my drive. My curiosity to live has been my drive into resilience. And then my deepening of resilience has driven this powerful leadership within me that all of a sudden now I started this business. Here's my secret for all y'all listening. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. Never, never, never. I didn't set out for any of this. All of this has been because it's like when you go into the space of resilience and this powerful leadership, when you get more curious about your business and your life and what you can literally succeed at, all of a sudden you find yourself keynoting, right? And you're like, wow, what else can I do? And I think that's been the coolest thing out of all of this. And it's not just me. I'm going to forewarn you. It's not just me.
Yeah.
I am not the same person I was 10 years ago. And it's not just me. We all have this ability. You're meant to be in this space.
Yeah. Wow. And was writing the book therapeutic for you, Sarah? Like, was that a big, I mean, I'm sure, I don't know, was it a driver, or was it you did it because, you realized this was something that you maybe wanted to do, or which came first, I guess? Was it
well, here's what's funny. When I was 17, I knew I was going to write a book. And my friends, I have two very, very, very best friends that I've been friends with since I'm 49, so 47 and like 30 something years. And I told them, I said, at about 38, I was sitting there going, I just don't feel like I'm doing enough with my life. And I don't know why. And then, or maybe it's 39. And then my life imploded at 40. And I kept saying, for some reason, I want to write a book, but it's not that I don't write, but I was never like a writer.
Yeah.
And then everything happened and I realized, I think, we all have these awareness of desires that we shove down and compartmentalize and put under the rug. And it's like, well, we shouldn't be doing that. And then all of a sudden, if we have these, if we start listening to them, if we start listening to those moments, right? Those like tapped in moments with self that's in your gut where you're like, I feel like I need to be doing this. And not brushing it aside, but actually listening to it and allowing it to come forth. That's where the magic of life happens.
Yeah.
So writing the book was extremely therapeutic for me. I'm laughing because I wrote it during during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I live in a very small house. I sold everything and I sold my huge home and chose to really simplify everything. And so during the pandemic, I had my two younger sons, my niece. I have a 3-legged dog and a kitten. I was sitting there trying to write my book in 800 something square feet.
In your now collapsed space. Yeah.
In my collapsed space. And all my kids kept telling me was, we literally sold our house. We lived across the street from where we live right now. So we went from 4,200 square feet to 800 something square feet. And they're like opening the door and they're like, you realize we could be in that right now, Mom. And I'm like, but aren't you much happier in this? Because we're cozy.
Yes.
So it was therapeutic writing my book, and it was also a very interesting time.
Very cool. Well, and so, the other thing, because now I think in particular, I mean, you still have family stuff. You do like to do kind of a lot of nature things outside, and you're now getting into doing kind of a lot of keynotes and other things. How are you keeping the balance of those things to make sure that, there is some type of balance in your life? Or is it not? Or is that a challenge?
Well, so I do have a very full plate. I have to say, I have a very full plate, but I think the most important thing for me has been continuously coming home to my values and what's important to me. Right. And also holding some really, really strict boundaries on relationships, because I've encountered relationships in my past that were sucking way too much energy out of me. And then I have to say, you know what, this just isn't working. And I continuously go home to that. What's important to me and what's driving me moving forward. I'm not in a relationship, and that's by choice, but yet not. It's like, you have to have people that can fit into your space. And I do lead a very, very full life, and I love my life. Like, if I can wake up every morning and say, I love my life, then what I'm not doing, I mean, I'm doing something right.
Yeah.
It's
That's right.
because I really do. Like, I wake up every morning and I'm like, I freaking love these conversations I get to have with people like you. And I love I love, I love my business, and I love, but it's not just about the business. It's I love my clients, right? And I love watching them go through their change. And I love keynoting and then having people come up after me, and, grown men down to, like the videographer, down to like the women, down to the people that are working there. And they're like, God, that message really hit home. And to me, like, that's my drive right now, is that just to keep impacting in a way that when I take my last breath, I'm not going to leave here with regret. Now, hopefully someday at some point, I can have a little bit more balance in my personal life and,
Yep. Yep.
and get into that meaningful relationship as well. That said, as my mom used to tell me all the time, she would say to me, we had so many conversations on this. And my mom would always say, don't settle, like, don't settle. And I refuse to. I know, I do lead a very, very adventurous life. I love, like, every year I take anywhere from 7 to 22 days, and I go into the mountains with my friends that we love each other and support each other, and we trailblaze through the, waypoint through mountains, and we have a blast. And so,
Very cool.
it's hard. It is hard, though. I got to tell you,
Yep.
especially with athlete sons. Holy moly, I am on the
Yeah.
road a lot because of
Yeah.
that. But I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, and so do you, are you a person who now has, like, for the next little while, do you have are you a big goal setter? Do you set out, like, are you the kind of person that writes everything down? This is what I'm going to
Oh.
do for the next year, and I've got to figure out timing around it? Or are you kind of see how things go and kind of go with the flow a bit? How does that work for Sara?
I'm a little bit of both. So I have to say I'm a little bit of both. I so as I talk a lot about this too, is with my clients in speaking, there's the destination, which I think that for so many people, that's the goal.
Mhm.
But then there's also the journey, right? And I don't live by the journey, I live by the moments. So so I even like pull it back even more. To me, every moment is so meaningful. Like, I'm all in with this conversation right now, right?
Mhm.
Like, this is where I'm at with the moment. I think that every moment guides us to the next one. So in other words, I can have a goal, but guess what? That may not be the goal, because that goal may be so much larger than what I'm even anticipating. Makes sense?
Yeah.
And so I think that so often we put this goal and we lose sight of the possibilities and what's really meant for you. And, and so a relationship that I was in recently, I never thought about keynoting, but this particular person had been a keynoter. And I was like, wait a second, why am I not doing that? Because I know who I am as a woman, and I'm walking in what I preach. And I see so many people that are not, quite frankly, walking in what they preach.
Mhm.
And that was a huge, that's an awareness lesson for me. And so I thought, okay, well, no, wait a second. If other people are doing this and I know what I'm capable of, why am I not doing that and serving in that way? So really, I think that you can have this goal, but so often, I'm just going to state it, we as humans, we don't look at that trajectory of goals as even big enough. And so I'm a goal setter, yes. I'm more of an intention setter. I'm more of like a leading from my heart and my soul, and what's my values driven space, like what's my why. And as long as I'm in touch and in line with my why and my true north, there are no limits. There are
Yeah.
no limits.
Well, and I like the idea that people sometimes will miss opportunities as they come up when you go through that type of process, because they're so fixated on a certain path to get there. And oftentimes your best opportunities come up, when you least expect them as well. And so you have to be open to that.
And I also think that, for example, when we're fired, we're like, oh my God, I'm fired. Well, no, you're actually opening yourself up to something that's so much, like, how do you know?
Mhm.
Right. And so we get so fixated on this, almost like this, the pit, right? Of like the whys, the hows, this happened to me and all of that. And it's more so shift your perspective, take a 180, stand on the mountaintop and take a 180 and look at the different view. And we can look at that different view. It's actually happening for you, your greatest possibilities. And that's what I've taken from relationships, every single one of them. So, but here's the thing, you got to thank yourself for that. because you're the right. Like that's the other thing. Empower yourself through the learning,
Yeah.
because you say, oh, that trauma happened for me. No, absolutely not. Never should have. Empower yourself through the learning that you have taken upon yourself to get to this place that you're at right now and will continue to go to.
Great. Well, I mean, people have had tons of great stuff to take away from our conversation today, Sarah, so far. The one thing that we always ask everybody is to maybe try to have a couple of things that, like a couple of specific things. And I think that people probably find it very intriguing that if they're going through that journey, or they're kind of looking at how they tackle some of this stuff, you've talked about the kind of healing part of nature.
Yeah.
If somebody's going through something right now and is listening and thinking, that maybe is something I should start to do you have a couple of just tips on how do they start doing that? How do they maybe move themselves towards something that maybe not everybody is very used to using that as a tool?
Yes, 1,000%. Again, like I could go into this for hours.
Yeah.
Um, so go back to yourself as a child. So in other words, when you were walking outside and you were watching the clouds, what drew you to the clouds? What drew you to the leaves, watching the leaves, in the wind? When I was younger, I used to plop my butt in the cornfields and I would just watch the bugs. I never realized that that was actually healing until I was 40. And then I started grabbing my paddleboard and I was on the ocean. I'm like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
It's the slow down and just watching how nature is metaphorically working, right? Like the Grand Canyon wouldn't be the Grand Canyon if it wasn't for all of the microclimates and everything that the force of nature that created it. And again, like everything in life shapes us. It does not define who we are. We are not attached to that unless we choose. And so, just being able to go outside and just sit, plop yourself into the grass. And I know that's really hard for so many adults because they don't want to get dirty and you're an animal. We are animals. We are meant to be outside. And so just going outside and breathing, taking a deep breath and feeling into your body, that in and of itself is extremely healing. And also just receive the gifts that it's giving you. Like really receive the gifts that it's giving you. Thunder, for example, used to scare me as a child, but now I can appreciate it because it's such a beautiful, sound mechanism that just vibrates through this earth of ours, right? And so
Yeah.
I think just really being able to appreciate it for what it is and allowing it to just be with you, that in and of itself is super, super healing.
Yeah.
Listen to it, have awareness of it, your senses, open your senses to it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, great things, and I'm sure people will want to, I know, kind of read your book and hear more about kind of what you do, maybe see your TED Talk, things like that, to kind of get to hear more. I mean, and thank you for being so open with
Yeah.
your both your story and for for the things that you've brought forward today. If people are looking to follow you and maybe find your book and all of those things, what are some of the best ways to do that, Sarah?
I am on LinkedIn, Sara Schulting-Kranz. I'm also on Instagram, Sara Schulting-Kranz. I am on TikTok, gosh, only because my team wanted me to be. I just
Yeah.
I'm not very much on, and I'm not really on Twitter. I can't help it. And I'm a little bit on Facebook, but not very much. Mainly it's Instagram, LinkedIn now. Just loving the LinkedIn space. You can
Yeah.
also find me in my website, saraschultingkranz.com. My book is in there. It's on Amazon. Walk Through This, Harness the Healing Power of Nature and Travel the Road to Forgiveness. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the bookstores. And then my podcast, though we're switching the name now because we got some pretty cool things happening over there.
Mm-hmm.
It's Live Boldly with Sara Schulting-Kranz. It's going to be shifted to Live Boldly with Sarah. Follow along because we got some cool things happening over there too.
Very cool.
It's really, really fun. And yeah, just message me. Just reach out. I'd love to have a conversation. If you're looking for a keynote on resilience, the new art of resilience, it's a very different kind of resilience. I'd love to talk to any of you about that.
Yeah.
We're pitching a really super cool program actually that I want to share with you that through this keynote that I did on Friday, where it includes lunch and learns afterwards. And then I go back and I actually take them through nature, through like we go into a created program outside.
Yeah.
This particular one is in Denver. So I'm going to be guiding them on a hike and taking them outside and having them really teaching them how to utilize it for their own mental, emotional, physical health. And
Very
so
cool.
Yeah, it's very, very
Wow.
cool. So
Wow.
it's
And
not,
I do think that, you're talking about resilience being different than it was before. I actually think most organizations now are struggling with this, even with their, with their leaders and with their employees for everything that's probably happened over the last couple of years. And, it's actually become, one of the biggest topics that people are trying to impact with their employees right now. So,
do we have 1 second? Can I share something
yeah,
with you?
yeah.
It's really, really interesting. So when I got off stage this last time and I was really diving into this with them about the 5 pillars, the one that impacted them the most is the one that I was shocked about. Not, I wasn't shocked, but I kind of was like, we're going to see how this goes, because in my own life, self-forgiveness has been the biggest key.
Hmm.
Why? Because we are human and we're meant to take risks. We're meant to fail. We're meant to put ourselves in uncomfortable situations. And the fifth pillar in this resilience talk that I have, it's all about self-forgiveness. And that's what my book is on. And literally, like, I cannot tell you across the board how many people came up to me afterwards and said, thank you for talking about self-forgiveness in the way that you have, that makes sense for all of us. So that
Hmm.
it gives us permission to also grow as human beings personally, but also professionally into this new space.
Yeah.
It is really cool. Like, it's tapped in. And so I think that I agree with you. I think that people are definitely looking at resilience in a different kind of way. It's not mindset. It's not compartmentalized, and
Yeah.
nor should it be,
Yeah.
because we're in a different time.
Yeah. Yeah, really super important stuff, because it has become such an issue, and I'm sure you're impacting tons of people, which must be a great feeling as well. So,
Cool.
again, for anybody here, what we will do as well is we'll put it in the show notes, all of your links as well, so that if people did miss that, definitely take a look in the show notes, and you can click through and follow Sarah's stuff. Get her book. There's some fantastic content on, and listen to the podcast as well. So we'll put all that stuff in there. And
Thank you.
again, I know you've got a busy day, so thank you so much for taking the time with us today, Sarah.
Well,
Really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me on. Like, I love jam sessions like this. So it's a
Yeah.
great.
All right. And to everybody else listening, we will talk again on Big Idea, Big Moves.